the one deposed to the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. The committee was established to assess the wide-ranging allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference within the criminal justice system made by Mkhwanazi. Mkhwanazi is the committee's first witness today and tomorrow. Lekganyane apologized to the members of the media for closing the meeting without prior notice.
There were issues that were validly raised by members of parliament, members of this committee, regarding the statement that was presented before this committee and before yourselves. Its quality had to be enhanced to meet the standard that the committee has set.
The Madlanga Commission has meanwhile issued controversial businessman Brown Mokhotsi with a notice that informs him of the allegations placed before the Commission that center him in the alleged unlawful interference of the South African Police Service and its affairs. Mokhotsi is an alleged associate of embattled Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who has been widely accused of siphoning money from businessman Vusumuzi Ketmatlala to bankroll the African National Congress's activities. The notice informs Mokhotsi of his right to be heard and details his options, which include submitting an affidavit within 5 days of receipt of notice. Should he decline to be heard, the Commission's chairperson can still direct him to respond or to appear before the Commission. The daughter of South Africa's President Nelson Mandela, Makaziwe Mandela, says the family is relieved that the Israeli forces have released a flotilla activists. They include Madiba's grandson, Mandla Mandela. Makaziwe Mandela spoke to SABC News.
Mandla is a married man, he has children. I think we are all happy that nothing has actually happened to them. You know, on the news it said that Greta was tortured severely. I'm sure others also were tortured, not just Greta, because you can't predict what those Zionists would have done to them. And so we're grateful.
Hamas has called the day of October 7th attack on a meaningful turning point in the region. Israelis are gathering at memorial events to mark 2 years since Hamas attacks in 2023, in which about 1,200 people were killed and 251 others were taken hostage. Israel's war against the militant group has killed more than 67,000 Palestinians, according to the territory's health officials. The BBC's Rushdie Abulaf, who is in Istanbul, says local social media accounts are flooded on this anniversary.
Some share photos and videos of their loved ones that they lost during this war. Others were sharing the picture of their beautiful life, their houses, their cars, their nice neighborhoods that once exist in Gaza, not anymore. One of them said this morning that I lost the old version of me, and after I was displaced 7 times and I lost members of my family, I am no longer able to handle this catastrophe.
Recapping the top story this hour, Tanzania's police force says it is investigating reports that the former ambassador turned government critic Humphrey Polepole had been kidnapped. This after his family said he was forcefully taken from his house. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Wepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In a sports headline, the tennis players at the Rolex Shanghai Masters are experiencing heat problems despite the enticing 2025 prize money. South Africa's Minister of Sport has made funds available to refurbish Mabatu Stadium. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. It is a Tuesday. Here's what we've got in store for you on the agenda for Africa in Business. We are going to be taking a look at the challenges faced by small and medium enterprises in East and West Africa. That is in our Standard Bank slot coming up a little bit later on this hour. We're also going to be looking at the latest developments as far as maize is concerned in Zimbabwe. You'll remember that there was a drought last year, an El Nino-induced drought that led the country to import maize. What has been the change in that situation, and what has led to the recent release of the import embargo? Also, a look at FlySafe Air, and you'll remember that it was going to be grounded given a deadline of January 2026 in order to meet some requirements as far as licensing is concerned with local ownership. We'll be talking to aviation analyst Guy Leach regarding the latest on the South African High Court and FlySafe Air. That and a whole lot more coming up for you this afternoon on Africa in Business. An invitation for you to continue interacting with us on our various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are at Channel Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Now, Kenya is taking decisive steps to strengthen its public finances and promote sustainable growth. President William Ruto has announced the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund as well as an infrastructure fund, and both of these are aimed at channeling investments into strategic sectors of the economy. This move comes as the East African nation seeks to reduce its reliance on borrowing. And you'll remember that this follows years of heavy infrastructure spending that has left the country with one of the continent's highest debt repayment to revenue ratios. Our economics reporter, Innocent Samosa, has more details.
Kenya has struggled with high debt repayments in recent years. The question is, how realistic is President Ruto's plan to fund key sectors through the sovereign wealth and infrastructure funds without falling back into heavy borrowing? Economist Patrick Mwinde weighs in.
I would like to say, one, it's not entirely a new concept. There has been a bill in Parliament that has sought to establish the Sovereign Wealth Fund with three components. One component to focus on stabilization, another component to focus on infrastructure, another component to focus on preserving part of Kenya's wealth for future generations. So while the president spoke about it this past week, it's not entirely new. It's a concept that has been in Parliament. It's a concept that has been discussed.
From an economic standpoint, Mwinde notes there is growing skepticism about whether the privatization process will truly serve the public's interest or merely result in the transfer of state asset into the hands of a few private individuals.
Now, in the current environment, there's a lot of suspicion around that because we have seen cases where big infrastructure projects have been offered through controversial public-private partnerships, or where we are seeing voluntary investors coming in big time and trying to get control on key infrastructure developments. So right now, there is nobody who is opposed per se to privatization because the Kenyan economic model is more capitalistic. So there's no problem with the government privatizing its state corporations. I think the question that Kenyans are asking is about transparency and also looking at some of the state agencies that have been targeted for privatization.
Meanwhile, economist Martin Adati believes that this is a step in the right direction.
The issue of having a sovereign wealth fund, it can help Kenya manage its natural resources, reduce dependence on debt. However, it requires careful management as well as structured framework to ensure that there is transparency and accountability. Infrastructure funding, Kenya has in the past secured significant funding like the $350 billion samurai bond from Japan.
Adati shares strategies that should be prioritized to ensure these investments translate into inclusive long-term economic growth for ordinary Kenyans.
The main issue about this infrastructure funding is we need to have the funds that are generated are then properly utilized and invested in areas where they will be productive so that the country does not struggle to pay the debts when they are due. Also, there have been several funding gaps that the country has that still needs money for. So the country has to do quite a bit to be able to raise enough resources, and this can only be achieved through effective project management, reducing budget deficits.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Simos in Johannesburg.
We are on OpenView's audio bouquet. Channel 628.
Amajita are through to the knockout round of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Be with us this Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. as South Africa's Under-20s face Colombia, streaming live on SABC+. And there's more. Other Under-20 World Cup matches are also streaming live on SABC+, with selected fixtures on SABC Sport Channel and SABC One. Wave the flag, Mzansi, stand up for Amajita, the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Amajita coverage on SABC+, powered by SABC Sport.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 14 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A high court in South Africa has granted FlySafair Air, the country's low-cost airline, an urgent interdict that scraps the January 2026 deadline for it to make sure that it fixes its foreign ownership structure. This deadline was imposed by the International Air Services Licensing Council. Now, the Air Services Licensing Council threatened the airline with sanctions in late 2024, and these included a suspension or a cancellation of its license. FlySafair was given 12 months to resolve its ownership structure. And for more on this, we're joined on the line by aviation analyst Guy Leach. A very good afternoon to you, Guy. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Yeah, hi. Nice to be with you too.
Perhaps let's start off with an understanding of what the impasse is. Could you take us through the current ownership structure of FlySafair and what the Licensing Council wanted it to rectify?
Yeah, well, it's quite a convoluted little story. So I need to take listeners back to 2014 when FlySafair was originally founded. And it was founded essentially by the holding company of the company that was originally called Safair. And Safair is held by an Irish company, Air Services, the aircraft leasing company. And at the time, Comair objected to the fact that FlySafair was more than 50% owned, in fact 75% owned by an offshore company, because the law says that 75% of an airline, South African airline, has to be owned by South Africans. So there was if you remember, FlySafair didn't in fact get off the ground for about another 8 or 9 months while the ownership structure was changed, and they created a trust for the local entities, and that was acceptable to the Air Services Licensing Council, and so they launched. But then in 2019 or thereabouts, it was discovered that actually the ownership structure had been quietly changed, and now the Irish leasing company was now effectively once again the majority shareholder, or at least that was discovered in terms of the formal reporting, the annual reports by the Irish leasing company. And there were obviously complaints from competitors, notably from Airlink and from Lyft, which is Global Airways. And this matter has been grinding through the courts pretty much since then. And it's not an easy thing to decide upon, which is why initially the Air Services Licensing Council gave them a year to sort it out, and now they've effectively given pretty much an open extension to continue to sort it out.
So were there any repercussions for this quote-unquote silent change?
No. There haven't been any repercussions yet for FlySafair, which must, I suppose, really irritate the competitors. But as I said, the matter is complex or convoluted. It relates around very elaborate legal constructs, such as the beneficial ownership of trusts, and what exactly is a natural person. Is it a warm flesh and blood person? And if so, what about where do they actually reside? Do they have to be South African citizens, or do they have to be residents of South Africa? These are all things that are being argued in the courts. I think one of the benefits of this whole exercise will be that there will be a lot more certainty or clarity on the way or on the shareholding requirements of airlines. But for now, it was clear that they weren't going to get a clear decision by the deadline at the end of this year. So the court has effectively granted an indefinite extension, which I think goes to show sympathy for the fact that Fly SAFair is actually properly campaigning the issue, at least through all the legal mechanisms.
This level of ambiguity or perceived ambiguity, is there a history or precedence of this? Because this is not the first airline to be granted a license, and these are prerequisites that have been there from the beginning.
Well, yeah, look, it's the first airline to have had its foreign shareholding questioned, and that is why these issues are essentially novel, or if you like, precedent setting. As I said, the issue is, yeah, sure, you can have a trust that's domiciled in South Africa, but what happens if the trustees are in fact foreigners? Does that meet the law or is not? And these are issues that are being tested for the first time in a court. I think it's worthwhile, if I may jump to perhaps or anticipate another question. Well, does it make a difference? The complainants, the Fly SAFair's competitors, argue that it does, because they say that a foreign shareholding gives access to cheaper capital, and capital is one of the single most important inputs into an airline. It's made it possible, for instance, for Airlink to acquire 10 brand new aircraft on leases, and it's one of the biggest constraints that SAA currently faces is the lack of capitalization. So the competitors argue with considerable conviction that Fly SAFair's foreign ownership gives them an unfair advantage.
And do we know what the airline has done to date to try and rectify the structure and even, I guess, the interpretations of the law and the clauses therein as per International Air Services Licensing Council directive?
Well, the airline hasn't in fact done anything other than ask the ASLC, that's the Air Services Licensing Council, for a clarification as to what they actually mean by a South African resident or by offshore ownership and what is the beneficial ownership of trusts. All of those questions, they've been asked, and they said, look, we will comply as long as you tell us what the actual the goalposts are, if you like, what the requirements actually are. If you give us clarity on what those are, then we will comply. But until we know exactly what those requirements are, because the Act is not very clear, then we're just going to continue on as we are at the moment.
So Guy, why exactly did the court grant this interdict? And as you say, it's indefinite. By January 2026, it was supposed to have been resolved. But now, obviously, it extends that period, even of discontent, for the competitors.
My understanding is that the court granted the interdict or gave the extension in time because the matter is, in fact, I don't want to use the word sub judice because it gets used and abused so much, but the fact is the matter is in the hands of the court already. So the courts are effectively just giving themselves more time to try and resolve the issues.
Thank you very much, Guy Leach, putting that into perspective for us. Certainly we'll continue watching this very closely. As you said, it is going to be a precedent-serving ruling, whatever the outcome may be, as far as foreign ownership and what actually constitutes foreign ownership in the interpretation of that law. Aviation analyst Guy Leach, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Guy Leach takes us to 22 minutes after 4 p.m.
Annika Longi sur Channel Africa.
Comment est-ce que les militants et sympathisants du parti Les Transformateurs ont-ils réagi face à la condamnation de Succès Masra?
La condamnation de Succès Masra ne nous a pas surpris et les militants transformateurs ont été bouleversés et indignés étant donné que le verdict est un verdict lourd, illégal, injuste et donc face à la répression dans laquelle le peuple tchadien est confronté, les militants transformateurs se sont résignés résigner de ne pouvoir pas sortir manifester. Et donc c'est une situation totalement absurde pour un pays. Et aujourd'hui, nous célébrons le 11 août, fête de l'indépendance. On pensait que le verdict allait être plus ou moins clément, mais le verdict est sévère.
Annika Longi, tous les dimanches sur Mix Vibration.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is 23 minutes after 4 p.m. as we turn our sights now to Zimbabwe. It has been reported that in October 2025, which is this very month that we're in now, Zimbabwe quietly lifted its temporary ban on maize imports. In August, the southern African country imposed a ban on maize imports to help boost local farmers, as there was enough to supply its millers after a bumper harvest. A decision that was met with skepticism by some analysts who believed that the domestic supply would be insufficient. For more on this, we joined on the line by Wandile Sihlobo, a chief economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, AgBiz. Lovely talking to you once again, Wandile. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thanks for having me on, Thami.
So, if you could put this into perspective for us by highlighting the main reason that was pushing Zimbabwe to reconsider its maize import ban.
Thami, I would start off by saying, as we speak, it's not yet clear officially if Zimbabwe has lifted this ban or not. But Zimbabwe as a country uses maize as a staple crop, just like any other country in the Southern Africa region. And they need a year about 2 million tons in order to feed themselves, as well as for the livestock, poultry, and the likes. And this year, 2025, they had a harvest, at least according to our estimates and many other private analysts, of about 1.3 million tons, which of course was more than twice to me what they produced last year, because last year was devastating. They had a crop of just over 600,000 and they needed to bring over 1 million tons of maize there. So this looked to me like there is quite a good supply in the domestic market. And while we knew that they didn't have enough, but the government went out and said, look, we will block imports for now and prioritize domestic prices. So looked from a farmer perspective, that's a good thing because they've invested in farmers and they want their farmers to have a place to sell. But looked from a consumer perspective, it's a tricky one because you had a situation where maize prices in Zimbabwe were roughly 20% or more higher than what they would find in South Africa, Zambia, and elsewhere, which means then that the consumer was constrained and also they didn't have much of a variety to actually go and buy where the prices are conducive or favorable. And of course, then on the 26th of September, we began to see a flow of maize from South Africa to Zimbabwe, which is where then we have to ask ourselves if has the policy changed or not. And so far, it's unclear to us on what really is going on.
When we take a look at the 2024-2025 production for the season, you highlighted the 1.3 million tons that were harvested, and the country needs 2 million tons. So that leaves a shortfall then of 700,000 tons that they needed to be met by those imports. But because the ban was imposed, obviously then it means that the priority is to ensure that there is enough of a domestic supply and that the domestic market is stimulated enough to meet that 700,000. What was the case? Did the local farmers meet up to this quota?
You see that, I mean, they literally didn't have a way of meeting that because, as you know, we grow maize between October each year, harvest from around May, June, July in the next year. And this was a situation on the season that they've ended. And you and I know that Zimbabwe has not actually been as self-sufficient in quite a long time when it comes to maize supplies. Our sense at the Agricultural Business Chamber was that they would need to bring in maize imports anyway from the end of this year and into next year, regardless of what the government policy was because there was just not sufficient physical maize supplies. If anything, I had feared that we would start to see grain smuggling, which would not be an ideal thing to see. But I'm glad then now to see that the prices, the maize imports that have went to Zimbabwe have actually gone through their proper channels of going in, which is why we are able to obtain the data. But there was just not enough supply. If anything, it will be useful for the government to continuously support their farmers for the upcoming season, which starts now, and farmers will be tilling the land all the way through to the beginning of January to plant. So if they are thinking about lessening their dependence from suppliers in the next year, this is the period to support the farmers to deliver such.
What does it mean, though, Wandile, in the long term for domestic production of maize if they were not able to even meet the 700,000 Rand shortfall? Because as you mentioned, the main reason behind the initial ban was to protect those farmers and to capacitate those farmers, but that has not been successful.
The reality there to me is that since that early 2000s, disastrous land reform in Zimbabwe, unfortunately, investments have fled from the agricultural sector in the country. The large-scale commercial farming have also not been as vibrant. Seed technology that is needed to improve yields has not been there. I mean, I'll give you a quick comparison. If you look at the amount of maize farmers harvest per hectare in South Africa, on average, they harvest about 6 tons per hectare. If you cross the border of Limpopo, the farmers harvest about 0.5 tons per hectare, which is way less than what they harvest in South Africa. And the difference on that is the technology, better seed cultivars, levels of fertilizer application, and all of the technologies that are needed. And unfortunately, that requires both the investments as well as the government being open to registering new seed cultivars, which unfortunately is not the current discussion that I hear taking place in Zimbabwe at the moment.
And as we wrap up really quickly, which of the countries that Zimbabwe is then likely to be importing maize from? You mentioned South Africa as one.
It will be South Africa as well as Zambia that I will see importing more, because north of Zimbabwe, there are big problems in Malawi, but that's a conversation for another day. But Malawi needs food and supplies like yesterday, but we'll discuss that some other time.
And thank you for bringing that up, because we certainly will be taking you up on that. So I guess let's set a date, Wandile. We'll set a time and a place.
Absolutely.
But definitely Malawi there on the agenda as we discuss food insecurity. We thank you for your time and your insight, Wandile.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Wandile Sihlobo. He is Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, AgBiz. Bring us to exactly 4:31. Let's head over now to the markets desk, where Nosipho Zuma is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. In your business indicators this hour, $1 is trading at 17 Rand 22 in South Africa. In Botswana is trading at 13 Pula 205. In Namibia it is trading at 17 Namibian dollars 22. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 23 kwacha 803 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 329. In Ethiopia, it is trading at 144 bir 78. In Uganda, it is trading at 3,000 shilling 435. In Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 453. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 467. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 47 Egyptian pound 59. In Tunisia, it is trading at 2 dinar 905. In Algeria, it is trading at 128 dinar 745. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 01. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,500 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,970 and platinum at $1,623 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is trading at $65.41 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Suma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And here is Figile Lingwati standing by with your latest from the business of sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. We begin our business of sport with tennis news happening in China. The governing body of men's tennis could consider a formal heat rule after a string of retirements at the Shanghai Masters this week blew the draw wide open, with top players wilting under soaring temperatures and punishing humidity. This Rolex Shanghai Masters in Shanghai, China, which is this year, runs until the 12th of October, has announced a prize money total of $9 million for the 2025 edition. The singles champion will earn $1 million and the winning doubles team will split the US $150,000 US. The Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture in South Africa, Gideon McKenzie, says his department will provide funds to refurbish Mabatu Stadium in South Africa's Northwest Province. McKenzie made the undertaking during his visit to Mahikeng in the Northwest Province, where he conducted oversight at different facilities. He says the stadium, which previously hosted local soccer league games, has the potential of hosting big sporting codes. Of late, the stadium has been used as an entertainment venue. Sports Minister Gideon McKenzie says refurbishment of the facility is needed.
We must fix the stadium. We are here today to keep that promise. Together with the MEC, we have already made some money available for the work to start, but we've realized much more is needed. That's why we are here. Orbit does not have a field. It can't be right. Those boys has made the whole Northwest proud. They have gone into the Premier League. Now they've done their part. We must do our part. Orbit FC needs a home ground.
Athletes are also calling for the restoration of the track. Comrades Marathon champion Tete Dijana, who lives in Mahikeng, says he has no choice but to use the facilities.
You can see our track, how it is. It's not in the good conditions. Preparing marathon, I don't have a choice because speed work is a basic thing, and I have to come here and prepare for that particular marathon because I need to do speed. So I don't have any choice but to come here and do speed work on these conditions. It's causing the injuries, and you can see it's like a tar road.
McKenzie says sports facilities are also needed in rural areas.
You can't have only sports in private schools. Myself and the Deputy Minister is on a mission now. We're opening combi courts throughout the country. We're opening combi courts in the most rural of rural areas. A combi court is a multi-purpose sports center where they can play hockey, they can play basketball, they can play volleyball, they can play netball. And we are now giving clothes and equipment, tennis, hockey, the things people can't afford in the rural areas. Not only rural, but the rural areas is part of it.
Now, golf news. Dean Burmester has confirmed that he will play in November's Fitch and Leeds PGA Championship on the Sunshine Tour as part of a personal desire with his teammates at Stinger GC, which consists of Captain Louise Eosteisen, Charles Schwartzel, Brendan Grace, and Burmester, has further contributed to the increase in the prize money for this year's Fitch and Leeds to $174,000. The 2025 total purse is $19 million, up from $18.5 million from a year ago. In 2025, the top 3 finishers will earn a 7-figure payday. Everyone in the top 10 will make at least $500,000. The top 32 will all clear 6 figures. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fide Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Amachita are through to the knockout round of the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Be with us this Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. as South Africa's Under-20s face Colombia. This is streaming live on SABC+. And there's more. Other Under-20 World Cup matches are also streaming live on SABC+, with selected fixtures on SABC Sport Channel and SABC 1. Wave the flag, South Africa. Stand up for Amajita. The FIFA Under-20 World Cup. Amajita coverage on SABC Plus, powered by SABC Sport.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 38 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. The Chief Executive Officer at Life Healthcare, Peter Wharton-Hood, says the discussion on the National Health Insurance, the NHI, in South Africa is beyond funding, but more about human capital and infrastructure. Wharton-Hood is among delegates attending the Hospital Association of South Africa's two-day conference, which is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. Thami Ngubeni compiled this report.
The 2025 edition of the Hospital Association of South Africa HASA conference is taking place at the Sandton Convention Centre north of Johannesburg in South Africa under the theme Sustainable Healthcare Together. The event is shining the spotlight on resilience and innovation as the world is turned upside down by the new era ushered in by an inevitable digital transformation. The meeting also hopes to highlight innovative approaches to clinical and quality care initiatives by showcasing insights and best practices from a diverse range of healthcare professionals, also with an exhibition that's running concurrently with the conference. Chief Executive Officer at HASA, Dr. Dumisani Bomela, says now more than ever, collaboration will be key for the success of the country's healthcare system.
I think there's never been a bigger need for collaboration as a way of achieving our goals within the healthcare system and delivering the healthcare that South Africans deserve.
HASA's members are privately owned hospitals in the Southern African nation, which include two stock exchange listed private hospital organizations, that is Life Healthcare and Netcare, and the recently delisted Mediclinic, as well as other independent non-listed groups like Landmed Group and Joint Medical Holdings and other independent facilities. Meanwhile, CEO at Life Healthcare, Peter Wharton-Hood, says there's no clear framework for a collaboration with the public sector that would result in an improved national healthcare system.
Unfortunately, the conversations, they start, they stutter, and then they stop, because there's no real framework within which we can see how our role has been mapped out in terms of what society wants is clear, but how we go about doing it is unclear, and that needs to be, I think, done quite quickly. I don't think it's a complex framework. I think it's more a set of circumstances that the public sector buys services from the private sector. I've seen that in oncology, very, very encouraging to see some public sector patients moving through the private healthcare systems, receiving the treatment and receiving it at competitive prices that make it affordable for the public sector, but by the same token are not extravagant, but yet are, shall we say, fair to the private sector.
Wharton-Hood says they're currently unable to come to an agreement with government on this due to differing ideologies, although there have been some inroads made in the oncology sector.
I don't think we're on the same page. I think at an ideological level, the delivery of affordable, accessible, quality healthcare to all citizens of South Africa, no one disagrees. The mechanisms by which that is achieved, I think there are as many opinions as there are people you ask the question of. So the conversations have not been structured, and as a result haven't been able to deliver anything productive. So maybe this is a moment where we try things and see what works. And I'm hopeful that what's happening in the oncology space sets the example to say this is possible.
The National Health Insurance Scheme, NHI, which was enacted last year, is currently being challenged in the courts by medical schemes, private doctors, and professional groups, arguing that it restricts rights such as freedom of association, the right to work, and the right to access healthcare.
It is exactly 4:42 Central African Time. That was Thami Ngubeni compiling that report on the NHI discussion that's currently taking place. It is the Hospital Association of South Africa seminar, which is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
Universities South Africa, in partnership with the Department of Higher Education and Training, is hosting the 7th annual Studentpreneurs Indaba and the 8th Biennial Entrepreneurship Development in Higher Education Lekgotla. The event seeks to highlight how young entrepreneurs are leading solutions in fields such as the green and the blue economy, in digital innovation, as well as rural and township entrepreneurship. They're also focusing on funding for startups. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Dr. Edwell Gumbo, Director of Entrepreneurship at Universities South Africa. Doctor, welcome to Africa in Business. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Thami, and good afternoon to your listeners.
I wonder what you think, Doctor, when you are hearing the type of discussions that are taking place, when you look at the type of innovation that's coming out from the young people. If you could just let us into your thoughts, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, thank you. I think what goes through my mind is all about hope. There is hope. There's amazing innovations that are coming from our youngsters, university students. You know, they are not just sitting by and watching and listening to all the bad news that we are seeing in terms of the decay that is happening in society, but they are lifting their hands to say, you know what, we've got solutions that can deal with the challenges of youth unemployment that, you know, between 15 to 34 ages. We have it topping 60% now. And the young people are saying, we've got the solutions. Besides being university students or alumni, we don't want to join the queues of the job seekers, but we want to be job creators. And as I said, it gives me hope, you know, it energizes me. And if you engage with them, you talk to them, you can actually see, you know, that hope, that, you know, that flicker of hope that one has. And there is hope. For the country, there is hope for the continent, and that hope is coming from the young people.
From the young people themselves. Can you perhaps highlight some of the success stories to date that you've seen, some of the innovations that have come from the young people?
Yeah, thank you. So let me just focus maybe on one, looking at the commercialization of indigenous knowledge systems. Firstly, as a people, as a continent, there are practices that we had, and like look at maybe the cosmetic industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and these students, researchers, innovators now have been able to bring science to that, to understand the background of that, like some of the medicinal herbs, you know, do it at a research level, probe research, find out what it does, and then take it on a journey of commercialization to say, let's commercialize our indigenous knowledge systems, because we, as a people, we had systems that worked, we had knowledge and science knowledge. And what do these students have? They have access to knowledge at universities, because they are university students, and they are using that knowledge to actually create businesses for the future. Pharmaceutical industries, for example, if I give an example of a young man, Emmanuel Kiyonga from Sifako Mahato Health Sciences University, who was our studentpreneurs, like the winner for last year, where he has actually come up with a medication for cancer patients, which was actually one of the first patent for Sifako Mahato Health Sciences Universities. So when you look at that, it's not just coming from anywhere, but it's founded on research. It's based on research. Him being a pharmacy student, you know, he used his research to actually come up with a medication that will help cancer patients, and founded at SMU, based in Harankua. And when you look at that, you say, you know, there is hope. And there's quite many others I can mention.
And as you mentioned, Doctor, it's really all about looking at what the current challenges are and then finding solutions for those challenges. If we look at the theme this year, it's focusing on how African universities can nurture these entrepreneurial ecosystems that actually do empower students, that give them the tools and the ability to really stretch their imagination and their creativity as well as their academic muscles. But looking more specifically at universities themselves in South Africa, what are they doing to nurture that entrepreneurial spirit of young people in various institutions of higher learning?
No, thank you so much. So firstly, the program, Entrepreneurship Development in Higher Education, which is a program of Department of Higher Education and Training located within USAF, USAF being a representative organization for all the 26 public universities. So what it seeks to do, it has 3 focus areas. The first focus area is how do you stimulate, enable, and drive student entrepreneurship. The second focus area being how do you then support the academics, embed entrepreneurship into the teaching, learning, and research to say in whatever field that they are researching, you need to embed entrepreneurial competencies and attribute. And the third focus area, then it looks at the institution, the university itself. Traditionally, universities were places of teaching, learning, and research. And we are saying into that, and that's what the program is actually doing and driving. Our universities are now entrepreneurial ecosystems that while we have access to knowledge, that is being generated by these students, by these researchers at universities, we say let that knowledge be generated in an ecosystem that pursues and promotes entrepreneurship. That talks to the policies that universities have that will enable and support entrepreneurship, where entrepreneurship is not seen now as a periphery activity or as something that you do on the side.
Right.
Yes, these students are focusing on their academics, but entrepreneurship becomes one of those graduate attributes that we want our students, by the time they graduate, to have these attributes. They can become employed. There's nothing wrong with that. Some will start businesses, and we are saying sometimes they don't even need to graduate before they start a business. They can start running their business while still students.
And you see, Doctor, that a lot of young people who actually start early with innovation are the ones that are most likely to succeed. It also gives you the ability to be pliable and to adapt to whatever environment you may find yourself in post-graduation. But where does the private sector fit into this entire matrix of empowering young people through their entrepreneurial journey? You've spoken about the institutions of higher learning. You've spoken about the Department of Higher Education. Let's focus now on the private sector.
No, thank you so much. So firstly, let me just talk about even the universities themselves, that we see the universities being spaces of experimentation, of piloting, of trialing and testing. And to be able to do that, then one needs resources. Our universities are public institutions. The budget is tight. And the private sector then has a responsibility to partner with the universities to provide that early seed funding for the development of these innovations or for the commercialization of that research. Some of that research is actually even at an asset level where the innovator, the student, the entrepreneur has an asset that they've created through their research, which is in the form of a patent. It can be IP. And this is where at our universities, we've got the technology transfer officers. Now, to be able to translate that, one needs funding. And this is where private sector would come in. Like, for example, the young man that I mentioned who has created a drug for cancer patients, for example, to take it right through the clinical testing and the testing and the approval. It's a journey that will take a couple of years, a few years, and one needs funding to be able to go through that.
Dr.
You can
Gumbo,
go to even...
Dr.
Yes.
Gumbo, we unfortunately will have to leave it at that for this afternoon, but I think point really, really well made, and congratulations, I must say, on the amazing work that's coming out of our universities and the caliber of young people that are being churned out with that entrepreneurial spirit. We thank you for your input, Dr. Gumbo.
No, thank you so much for having me.
It's been a pleasure. That's Dr. Edward Gumbo. He's the Director of Entrepreneurship at Universities South Africa.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Chanel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge aka Binal Export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. participation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:53 Central African time, our very much anticipated Standard Bank feature this afternoon. And this week we'll be looking at the challenges faced by small and medium enterprises, as well as the role that financial institutions play in driving solutions that will leverage payment solutions that are unique to Standard Bank markets in both East and West Africa. Norman Nwayo, who's head of merchant solutions at business and commercial banking at Standard Bank Group, joins us this afternoon to unpack this further. A very good afternoon to you, Norman. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Thami. It's a pleasure to be here and chatting to you and your listeners.
So what, Norman, are the key payment trends that you've observed across East as well as West Africa? You know the saying that cash is king. I wonder if that still is actually relevant across most African markets.
Definitely. I think the saying of cash is king still holds sway, especially in some of the rural and informal markets across East and West Africa. However, I think what I can definitely confirm for you is that the landscape is undergoing, a seismic shift. And what we're starting to see is mobile money, especially being led by pioneers such as M-Pesa, is starting to really dominate, especially in Kenya, where we're seeing about 70% of transactions, going on that rail. And even in the likes of Ghana and Nigeria as well, we're starting to see mobile money starting to make inroads. But over and above that, I think some of the key trends as well is we're seeing the adoption of digital wallets and instant bank transfers, which are really taking over. So definitely cash is still prevalent, and I think just another key probably metric is we've seen cash on delivery drop about 17% across these key markets. So definitely cash is still there, but there definitely is, I think, mobile money and some of these new kind of payment form factors are starting to make inroads.
And I wonder, you've spoken about mobile money and the impact that it has. Is there a difference in its evolution? In how it's being used in East African markets like Kenya and Tanzania versus the West African markets like Ghana and Nigeria? What have you observed?
Yeah, so I think from a East and West difference, mobile money, we see in East Africa, there's definitely a very high penetration and usage of mobile money. So it really forms the crux of that is almost the first payment method that most customers are using there. In West Africa, it's growing, but from a lower base, and we see that, in the West African side, the real, instant money transfers are becoming more prevalent there. But I think some of the other key differences between the East and West, what we see is, as I mentioned, is mobile money is first to choice, for in East Africa, whereas on the West it's more a mixture of bank transfers, and also the scale. M-Pesa has really done well in Kenya, and there's even though there's fewer mobile money services, but what we see is the transactional volumes and values are much higher. West Africa, it is catching up, but on average we're seeing that the transactional values or volumes are smaller, but it is starting to catch up as well. But I think a key sort of driver for that, what we see is the regulatory impact. So on the east side, the policies, especially in Kenya and that eastern blockers, the policies are very strong. They support the agent networks, and I think the framework is very clear and is conducive to a mobile money environment. Whereas on the west, we're seeing the regulation is coming in. However, I think there's still some issues around interoperability, trust, and fraud still remain to be a barrier to entry. But I think that it's like we see with in most of the territories, there is going to be, the trust grows, and definitely in the West as well, we do see an increase in the penetration of mobile money.
Norman, thank you very much. We'll continue watching the developments and the transitions within those payment solution spaces. We thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Thami.
Thank you. That's Norman Nyawo. He's head of merchant solutions at business and commercial banking at Standard Bank Groups. And quite interesting to look at some of the innovations that Standard Bank has come up with. I'm thinking of, solutions like Simply Blue that have been developed for the South African market. We'll continue focusing on this also perhaps in the next coming week on some of the solutions as far as mobile banking is concerned and alternatives that the financial services companies are putting in place for East and West Africa. It's exactly 2 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African Time. As we say bonjour to you, Joël.
Bonjour, Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Sur Vue d'Afrique tout à l'heure, pour les grands titres, il sera question du président malgache qui nomme un nouveau Premier ministre et nous parlerons aussi d'un nouveau rapport de Oxfam, entre autres titres. Merci de rester connecté. Merci, Thami.
Merci beaucoup et restez connectés as we hand you over now to Vue d'Afrique, which starts at 5 p.m. Thank you to our fabulous team at Africa in Business. From the news desk, Dwalane Tulongwepe, economics desk, Nosipho Zuma, sporting desk, Figile Lengwati, our production team, Mabubu Loka, our producer, technical producer, Dando Lutuli, and on social media support today, Talent Butelezi. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This has been your Tuesday edition of Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Reste connecté.